I'm Lynette Zang, Chief Market Analyst here at ITM Trading and a very grateful prepper. And today it's Mantra Monday, which is really all about why the mantra is what we need to do to make sure that you can sustain your standard of living as much as possible. So let's just jump right in. And food. Of course, we know that food is the biggest issue for people during these transitions. That could also be utilized as an indicator of where we are in this transition, because 34 million people in the US are food insecure. 9 million children in the US are food insecure. I got to tell you, it's not okay with me that we have this level of hunger in this country, let alone in the world, because this is just the US, but this kind of thing is happening all over the world. Especially when we watched farmers have to slaughter a bunch of pigs and dump out all of this milk. And so to me, you've got to make sure that you can always feed yourself, because you can't live without food. 53 million people turned to food programs in 2021, and 100% of U.S. counties have food insecurity. 100%. What is this telling you? It's telling you, number one, you better make sure that you have food security, whether it's buying long storage food, creating your own gardens, having some storage seeds in your freezer that you can rinse off and make live food. There are so many different ways, depending upon your circumstances and your budget, that you can ensure that you're going to be able to feed yourself, your family, anybody else that's important to you. Water, right? It's the same kind of thing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can generate your own water as long as there's enough moisture in the air. So right here in Phoenix, where we don't have a whole lot of humidity, this doesn't really work very well. But in most other parts of the country, these kinds of things work great. Atmospheric water generation research. So there are all different ways that you can do it, but basically this is the technology. There's air water, there's water in the clouds, goes through a filter, goes through all of these different processors, comes out hot or cold, you can drink it. So they're not very expensive. Prices are definitely going to range depending upon the system that you choose. But for those that want to make sure that they are water secure and they're in an area where you have enough moisture in the air, this is a great option. Seriously, this is a great option, and something I encourage you to look into for those that it's appropriate for. Now, we're talking about energy, and protests in Angola against lower fuel subsidies leave 5 dead. So basically what I'm trying to show you here, because it isn't just Angola, it's also in Sweden, it's in the UAE, it's in a number of places where governments will subsidize the energy. And then all of a sudden, when it gets too expensive to subsidize, they don't want to subsidize it anymore. Africa's third biggest oil producer reduced its gasoline subsidy last week, almost doubling pump prices. So here you have all of this inflation. And on top of that, even as energy prices are going down, what you're really seeing is that because of the loss of subsidies, prices in a number of places are actually going up. Nigeria, the continent's top oil exporter, scrapped its own subsidy, causing pump prices to triple. So now, why would they scrap these subsidies? And what are the subsidies that are happening here that they might be scrapping? Like, student loans, things like that. The reality is, for governments, for central banks, as long as it is not too expensive, and that really depends on the group, like to bail out the top 1%, not too expensive. To bail out the 99 and the masses, it's very, very expensive. And at some point they stop. And what happens when they stop? Then you have rebellion, because you can't give somebody something and then take it away. But that's what's happening right now. It is an indication of where we are in this trend cycle. And like I said, it's in Swedish too. Swedish budget watchdog blasts recurring power subsidies. So we're going to see this more and more. Now in North Korea, they fired long-range missiles after threat to U.S. North Korea test-fired a suspected long-range ballistic missile Wednesday after warning the U.S. of shocking consequences for flying spy planes polygang and claimed violated its airspace. Now we have to keep in mind that this is definitely a threat and that we very well could be. I mean, some think we absolutely are. In World War III, we just can't see it. So these are the things that are behind the scenes that are happening. So there's a lot that's going on, but this is absolutely a threat. North Korea's ICBMs, so those are the missiles, are the most powerful missiles in its arsenal and designed to carry a nuclear warhead to the U.S. mainland. Now look, if they actually ever did send a nuclear weapon or missile to the U.S., what if they knocked out the power grid? If you're holding all of your wealth inside of the system, you lose access. Hold it, own it. Keep it near you, even if you're putting it, like I obviously can't, so I have a vault, a private vault that I hold my metals in. It's close enough for me to walk if I had to, so you want it as close as possible. But if something happens, guess what? I still have stuff to barter with, as well as all the food that I'm growing and all sorts of other things. But things are getting extremely dicey in the Middle East. Of course, we've got the ongoing Russia war, and which I think is really a proxy war for China and the U.S. We've got lots of things going on. Anything can explode. Now, I put this on barterability because people are using what they think the fiat money as a tool of barter. And really, that's all money has become anymore. But peso devaluation would be very damaging, Argentina leader says. Oh, there's no signs of hyperinflation. Well, that's not actually really true. And in fact, when you look at the exchange rate gap, what this shows you is the central bank and the government manipulation. Because this red line is the official price of the peso, but this, they call it the free floating foreign exchange, which can proxy for the black market, right? So you can see that this gap between these two have really widened. It's now double the overvalued official rate. And look at the size of that gap. And this is what governments do. Because one thing they know is that a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So they suppress the price. They use manipulation to suppress what it looks like to the world, thinking that people will believe that as the truth. And many people do. But you've got to look a little bit beneath the surface, because the real market's just like the physical market, even though we have not hit all-time highs in the spot gold market, which is just about contracts, we definitely are hitting highs or recent highs in the physical only market. So that's where you find the truth, and not what the government tells you, but what the markets are actually really telling you. Wealth preservation. Oh, I love this report from the IMF. 3 uncomfortable truths for monetary policy. They're between a rock and a hard place. The first uncommon truth is that inflation is taking too long to get back to target. Will they actually be able to get it back to target? And why is that so important? First of all, they can manipulate the numbers to make it look however they want. So can they get it back to target? Yeah, with some manipulations, which they're used to doing. They can make it appear officially, like we saw with the peso devaluation. They can make it officially look like it's back at target. But the reality is that now that people have gotten increased wages, those wages are not going back down again. People are not going to be willing to work for nominally less. If they do it in inflated dollars, right? That's why that target is so important. If you lose 2% of your purchasing power, then you don't ask for more money because it's too slow. You don't really notice it that much. You think, meh, it's okay. But when inflation is rapid, that's when the public notices. And remember, this is a Ponzi scheme. It requires confidence, and that confidence is going away. Number 2, financial stresses could generate tensions between central bank price and financial stability objectives. So, I mean, isn't this a beautiful one? And when I say they're between a rock and a hard place, the Fed raising the rates by 1/4 of a point, right? But it still means that rolling over that debt and everything is far too expensive. And we have all sorts of corporate bonds that are coming up that have lost a lot of value, but they have to roll them over at much higher prices. So financial stability objectives are more about you not asking for more money, but they certainly don't want the corporations to have a tremendous amount of defaults. They expect some, but this is going to trickle down and it could create a domino effect. So, and if they lower rates again, all that's going to do is exacerbate the inflation. So it doesn't matter what they do. We're done. And I hope people get that. And number 3, central banks are likely to experience more upside inflation risks than before the pandemic because of all of the money that they pumped into the system during the pandemic. So that money is still floating around out there, and has to find a place to call home. So I'm telling you, yeah, this is the end. It should be very obvious to everybody. Community. Brexit champion Farage, and I actually really like Nigel Farage a lot. His account, Führer, puts heat on NatWest. Now, let me show you what this is about. According to Farage, one of the most prominent politicians behind the UK's 2016 decision to leave the European Union, what's at stake is freedom of speech. Are we not hearing that all over the world, including here in the US? And the principles of democracy. He claims that Coutts dropped him, that's a banking entity, because of his personal views, and that an unchallenged decision would mean the UK is no different than a Chinese communist-style social credit system. And I really think that we all need to take this into account because this is what's happening all over the world. We aren't a democracy anymore. We haven't been. We tell ourselves that we're still a democracy, but freedom of speech has been sharply curtailed.